Hi, I'm Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. What can I tell you? We finally got a studio audience. I've been saying this for years, and in fact, somebody actually was listening, and they made the long trek out here to the mountain of Har Nof to be able to be a studio audience so that my friend in Chicago, Rabbi Alban, will be happy. The things that I do for the people out there. And whether you are watching on Torah Anytime or wherever you listen or watch your podcast, we're happy to have you along for the exciting experience. And sponsorship this week is in memory of Bela Bas Pinchas, who passed away 3.5 years ago. And I'm just reading what was written over here. She is missed for her constant strength and guidance, her support, her profound love and caring. She has an overflowing amount of emunah in Hashem. Everything was bashert. It was intended. Yeah. She saw the constant good in the world around her and praised HaKadosh Baruch Hu for it. So the neshama should have an aliyah and should be in that schus that we're together. So we are well into the 3 weeks, and this is a negative time. You know, it's interesting. Sfiras HaOmer, we also observe certain laws of Avelis, but there's a different kind of an Avelis that's there. For example, the idea of not being able to buy new clothes during the 3 weeks or the 9 days, that doesn't apply to the sphere. Eating a new food, making a shechiyanu, that's not the Avelis. But the 3 weeks is obviously periods of mourning, and it's the saddest time on the Jewish calendar. The truth of the matter is that without darkness, there is no appreciation of light, and without difficult times, there's not an appreciation of the good times. We, in our family, we've picked up over the years certain expressions that our family uses. And we have a new one that we just got last week that has become now part of our family culture. And that is, obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu meant for Benny Friedman to record Yesh Tikva. And it's such a different way of looking at the world, right? No. If you look at it and say, you know, people used to ask me this, they say, how's everything? How's everything? So I say, everything is great, all things considered. I say, what does that mean? The only one who ever made this comment, I've said this for years, the only one who made this comment was Rabbi Dr. David Gottlieb, who said to me, you know that's a show on public radio. I happen to know that, but I don't think anybody else does or cares. But so what do I mean, all things considered? That means that if you look at the totality of the world, if you look from the beginning to the end, there's an amazing story I heard with the Chaim Kreisworth Zatzal, who I had the schus to have living in my building. It was the Rav of Antwerp. He was an incredible individual because he was involved in America, he was involved in Europe, he was involved in Eretz Yisrael, he was everywhere. But there was a lot of people in Antwerp, Jews, who were involved in the diamond business. And one of them got caught on a thing that was technically not legal, but everybody did it. It's if you drove 55 miles an hour and not over that on the highway, and you kept your hands at 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock, like they taught you in driver's ed, and checked your mirrors every 3 seconds, they would arrest you. Because society cannot work that way. I had a student once who, she told me that her father would not let her borrow the car and drive on the highway till he could see that she could drive and put on her makeup at the same time. She says, I know you're going to do it. I just have to see that you can do it. Yeah. So that's not the way real people drive. They should, make the driving test, with the radio blaring, somebody's hand hanging out the window, having a soda in the other hand. I mean, that's how everybody ends up driving. Yeah. But we'll talk about that when we have our special Ben Zmanim episode. I've got some stuff I want to talk about. But anyway, there's a certain attitude. You look at it, you say, okay, there's certain ways that there are official laws, and then there's what everybody has to do. So whatever it is, there was some kind of rule, and most people didn't keep it. Lahavdil. I had a book that was called 1,000 Ways to Win at Monopoly. Now, the truth is, it was an exaggeration. It was a guzma ba'alma because there wasn't 1,000 ways, but there are a lot of ways. And most of them come down to understanding the rules. But most people don't keep the rules. Ledugma, most people don't know this. You cannot put up a hotel. You have to first put up 3 houses, 4 houses, and after you put up 4 houses, you can put up a hotel. Lamay nafkamina. Because in the rules under equipment, it says that there are 12 hotels and 32 houses. And if you want to put up hotels and there aren't 12 houses in the bank, you can't put up hotels. Now, nobody knows this. Nobody follows this rule, but that's a rule. Yeah. When you mortgage a property and you take it out of mortgage, you have to add an extra 10%. It's the rules. It even says that on the back of the properties, but nobody keeps it. Yeah. So this was one of those rules, like you have to add 10% when you take your property out of mortgage in Monopoly, whatever the rule was. I'm not familiar enough with the diamond business in Antwerp to tell you, but so they chapped this Yid, and he was in trouble. So Chaim Kreisworth asks to meet with the judge. And he says to him, Rabbi, do you have any information that has bearing on this case? And he says, yes, I do. It's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. It says, Hevidan es kol adam lekaf schus. And he translates it for him. Judge every person. So he says, why does it say kol adam? It should just say that you should judge a person to kaf schus, to the good side. Why does it say the whole person? He says, because you could look at a person at any one incident and decide that based on this one incident, the person's a bad person. But if you look at the sum total of the person from the time they were born till the time they die, and you look at the entire structure, he's a good person. And this action, you might have to put it into context, and I remember there was a situation where Donald Trump fired somebody, and he tweeted out, I fired her like a dog. So everyone says, racist, I called her a dog. And then somebody put together a compilation of about 30 different people that he said, I fired him like a dog. Of all races, creeds, colors, and religions, there was no, that's just what he says. That was to say everything. So if you look at this one thing, you could think, oh, maybe this is racist. But if you look at the sum total, I always think that was absolutely amazing. I heard Rudy Giuliani once, somebody said to him, don't you think that, based on his actions that Donald Trump is anti-Semitic? He goes, I don't know, all his grandchildren are Jewish. He appoints his son-in-law to positions. He's got Jews over here, Jews. I don't know. If he's an anti-Semite, he's not very good at it, So you have to look at Kol Adam. So when someone says to me, how's everything? I say, everything's great, all things considered. Meaning, I put it this way sometimes, if it could be better, it would be. And that's, I can't say it as well as, obviously HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Benny Friedman to record, Yesh Tikva. Even though it was my song, etc., what are you going to do? I don't have that problem because nobody can tell my stories and jokes the way that I do, In fact, somebody says to me, I went to a Shabbat once, and this guy says, listen, don't use any of your material. I've been using it all for years, and I never gave you credit for it. So no one knows it's yours. Don't think you're stealing it from me. I said, don't worry about it. No one's going to confuse what you said with what I said. No, it's a whole different world, yeah? Someone said I should have like a joke and story gemach that they could just take. I said, help yourself. Take whatever you want. I have no problem. Anyway, but you have to look at the totality of a situation. So when you look at the 3 weeks, you have to look at it in the context of Klal Yisrael. You have to look at it in the context of Jewish history. You have to look at the whole thing. Now, let's talk history, because I know how much everybody loves history. Everybody loves history. Yeah? You could see people during history class when they were memorizing material, and dates and times and places, how much they enjoy it. Yeah? I was in 4th grade when I learned that the barbarians invaded Greece in 2000 BC. And I asked a question at the time, who cares? And the teacher said, be quiet or I'll throw you out of class. And I thought that really cut to the heart of the matter and really gave me an explanation in a depth that I was looking for. The answer is it doesn't really matter what year the barbarians invaded Greece, but if you understand that the role that Greece plays, and so if you understand history, if you can look at things and put into a context, things don't just happen from no place. For example, I just paid a shiva call today to Rabbi Shalom Gold, who was the rabbi of the Youngersville, West Hempstead for many years, and his wife passed away, and he had written a book about his experiences and the world that he was in. It's an amazing thing when you look at certain individuals who have built Torah. My good friend Chanuch Teller has a book called Builders, where he talks about different people who built institutions, built Torah, built things, and we take it all for granted. We don't know where it came from. So when you look at history, you're able to get a certain perspective. I told this over once. I heard Rabbi Frand be maspid Rav Ruderman, and he said, when you shook his hand, you shook the hand that shook the hand of the Alter of Slobodka. So he was a link for you to the Alter of Slobodka. He took you back to another generation. It's the famous story with Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky on the plane, where his grandson keeps coming over to check on him and take care of him. And he's sitting next to a professor from Hugh University. He says, if my grandson was here, he wouldn't want to be associated with me. He wouldn't even want anyone to know we were related. What is the secret that your grandson spends so much time? He says, listen, you taught the world evolution, and we all came from monkeys. So to your grandson, you're a bigger monkey than he is. We taught the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us absolute truth at Har Sinai, right? And the revelation. So I'm 2 generations closer to the Sinai experience than my grandson. So he looks up to me as a link to an event that had much greater impact. So history has that ability. It takes us back to places. Shavuos B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. If we go to Bayis Sheni, go to the destruction of the Second Temple. Interesting, somebody wrote to me and said, I thought you were more Hamish, you're going to speak more yeshivish for us, I see you translating the terms, Listen, I've made this clear. I have people with little background, non-Jews, people from all walks of life who watch this. And although some people might be more comfortable, if I spoke in a yeshiva shel oifen, then you're going to leave out certain people. I'm always a big believer in inclusion. I think the more people you can include, the better it is. I used to have this when we would have meetings of all the different Jewish communities, and I would insist that everything was of the highest kashrus standard. And they said, listen, Rabbi Orlofsky, we'll get you a meal, we'll get you one of those airline meals, instead of, we have to make everything kosher. And I said, no one here can't eat kosher. So why not do something that will be inclusive instead of something that will be excluding? And they agreed with me. In any event, if we go back to the time of the Romans, right, 2,000 years ago, on the 17th of Tammuz, the walls of Jerusalem were broken through. The Romans fought their way through the city, killing and destroying till they got to the Har Bayis. When you come to the Temple Mount today, you have no idea what you're looking at. If you take the tunnel tour, you have a little better perspective. But when you're standing at the Western Wall, you are floating in midair. There is just as much underground as there is above ground. So ground level was all the way down. It was a freestanding structure. The Temple Mount was like a fortress. And there were steps to get up, there were bridges, but it was a freestanding. So after they, captured the city, they still couldn't get the Har Bayis. Until Rosh Chodesh Av, they broke through, and they fought the Kahanim, they destroyed, and finally they desecrated the Beis HaMikdash on the 7th, 8th, and 9th of Av. They set fire to it by the end of the 9th of Av, and it burned through to the 10th at Chatzos. So that's the 3-week period. But you have to go back to the beginning. What was the first thing that happened on the 17th of Tammuz? The Jewish people thought Moshe was dead. They made a miscalculation. They thought the 40 days were up, and they weren't. And so they decided the world is going to end. Moshe was the greatest among us. He couldn't get the Torah. It killed him. No one can do it. We need to build something to be a symbol, a means, a medium for us to be able to reach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a, so to speak, mishkan. And that's what the egel was to them. That's what the golden calf was. It was something to be able to reach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then Moshe comes down on the 17th of Tammuz. Wow. Talk about awkward situations, yeah? You know, Moshe is supposed to be dead, and we're sitting there dancing and celebrating with the egel, and he comes down with the luchos, and we're, uh-oh. And he breaks the luchos and destroys the egel, and the whole process begins. It concludes with Yom Kippur. That's that process. And then, that was on the 17th of Tammuz. You go till Yom Kippur when we get the full forgiveness. Then we start to build the Mishkan. We dedicate the Mishkan on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. You got the timeline? Now about a year since we came out of Egypt. And now we have the only Pesach we kept in the desert. And then a month later we have Pesach Sheni. And then on the 20th of Iyar, we begin our march into Eretz Yisrael. 3 days we start complaining, then we want meat, we go through the whole thing, and then finally we say we want to send out Meraglim scouts. That takes them 40 days, and they come back on the 8th of Av. They bring their evil report, and on Tisha B'Av, everybody cries. What does it got to do with the golden calf? In other words, historically, the 17th of Tammuz is separated from Tisha B'Av by over a year. 2 events where we messed up. Obviously, we messed up. By building the Egel Azav, we messed up. By sending out the Meraglim and listening to their bad report, we messed up. But what's the relationship between these two, that the source of these two led eventually to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and the destruction of Yerushalayim? What's the link between these two events? So, and by the way, they're clearly linked. Rashi in Parshas Bamidbar says, do not count Shevet Levi with everybody else. Why? Because everybody who's in the count is going to die in the desert. And even though Shevet Levi sinned with the Meraglim, since they didn't do the sin of the Egel, the decree won't attach them. It's a 1-2 punch. There's a combination between the two. So obviously Rashi says this. And in both of them, Moshe uses the Yud Gimel Midos. There's a lot of links between these two events. But what conceptually is the link? Because understand that going from Shavuos B'Tammuz to Tisha B'Av, which is the 3 weeks, which is the period we're in now, yes, we're mourning the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, but why was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed then? It's because of the link between the Egel and the Meraglim. What's that link? What brings those two events together? Why did we build the Egel? We thought Moshe was dead. Fine. When Moshe Rabbeinu tells over the story in Vironment, which we read just before Tisha B'Av, he says, you came to me ba'arvuvia, in a mob. Rashi says, yeah, the young pushing the old pushing the leaders, everybody pushing, everyone shoving. You were in a panic. And you said, send out the Meraglim, send out the scouts. What was the panic? What was the panic by the Meraglim? What happened by the Egel? By the Egel, they said, Moshe's dead, the world's going to end, we're all going to die, we can't do this on our own, we have to build something. Rashi says, in Parshas Chukas, when he talks about the Para Aduma, which is a cow, right? Cow, and Egel is a calf. which is a baby cow. For those of you who don't live in agricultural society, more is the pity. You may not be familiar with all of the fancy terms that we're using here. Yeah? So you have a cow and a bull, and they have a calf. You have a ewe and a ram, and they have a lamb. You have a he-goat and a she-goat, and they have a baby goat. We just ran out of ideas by that point. So I guess at that point, a kid. Right. So in Hebrew, that's a se'ira and a se'ira and a gedi, right? Anyway, they had a kid. So people, you have a guy and a girl, and they have a kid also. So it's the same terminology. In any event, so but I kid. Anyway, so that's a different term. So the egel was a baby calf. What makes up for the egel? The mother calf, which means we did the sin out of an act of immaturity. Just like by the Meraglim. We want to panic. Let the adult come in and clean up the mess. Because kids are not always good at seeing things correctly. There is, in fact, chemicals in a teenager's brain that encourages them to take risks. There are chemicals in a 60-year-old's brain that encourages him to sit at home, drink coffee, try not to engage in argumentation, and just go, yeah? A lot, yeah? But teenagers are programmed to take risks because that's that age where you think you can do anything. And it's what allows you to go out and explore life. But unless you get married. If you were an intelligent person, you never would do something like that. But, you actually believe these people. You take risks. You jump in. That's the nature of people, of kids. Children tend to be impulsive. It's not time to make a change. Settle down, take it easy. You're still young. That's your fault. There's so much you have to learn. Father and Son by Cat Stevens. Yeah, and the father talks like that. And the kid goes, how can I try to explain? When I do, he turns away again. Anyway, so wonder if I can work in my Bob Dylan. But anyway, the idea the idea behind it is like the kid has this passion. Yeah. And older people tend to be much more relaxed. Yeah, it's okay. Don't hurry. And the people who came, build us an egel. And Hura, who was the adult, said, there's nothing to see. Please disperse. Return to your tents. We have everything under control. They kill him. They want to panic. We're not going to face HaKadosh Baruch Hu on our own. That's too hard. We need something to work with us. We were dependent. And what happened by the Meraglim? We can't carry Eretz. We can't capture it. We're too little. We're too small. The Meraglim went from tent to tent, shook hands with everybody. Well, you're all going to die tomorrow. It's been nice knowing you. And everybody panicked. Everybody just gave up. I used to say this all the time, and then I forgot it. I remembered it recently. But I'm always amazed at some of the things that I've said. And I listen to my own recordings because they're, number one, the best thing that's out there. And second of all, I don't remember anything that I say. Yeah. I remember the time... anyway, but you tend to forget things. Yeah. They say you reach a certain age, first thing to go is your memory. The second thing is... Anyway, so you don't remember things, yeah? But I once saw a quote on the wall. When I used to teach in seminary, they used to write down the best quotes of the week from different rabbis. And there was a quote from me. I don't remember having said it. Yeah, it was a great quote. And when I say it, I quote the quote, not me. Yeah. Most people live the life that happens instead of the life they want. It's 100% true. It's brilliant. I can't believe I even thought it up, but evidently I did because I saw it on the wall in my name. But what I used to say is, the reason people don't live a meaningful life is not because they don't think it's worthwhile, it's because it's hard. And people will always choose easy over hard. That's the way it is. Nobody wants to be put out. Nobody wants to have too much trouble. The 11th commandment. There were 10 commandments that were given at Har Sinai. There was an 11th that was given in the 1990s. Chill out. Take it easy. Relax. What do I need this for? Yeah, it's too much for everybody. Yeah. This is amazing. People can't handle anything. That's our generation. I've spoken about this before, but it hasn't really changed. Yeah? People can't handle it. I can't make Shabbos. I can't make Shabbos. I have to buy Shabbos. I can't make Pesach. We have to go away. Yeah. Mirz Hashem, if we do the Rabbi Orlofsky Pesach program, it won't be for that reason. It will be because I hope that all of us together will have a more meaningful Pesach. But let's put that aside. And it's part of our program. We're going to have you all clean and serve and cook for the hotel. So it's going to be not because we need you to, but it's going to be part of the perks that we're providing you for in our programming, because I know how important that is to you. Iron City Boy by Herman Wouk, if you want the reference that I'm basing that on. In any event, but everyone wants to live a meaningful life. Why don't they? Because it's hard. It's hard. I can't handle it. So people choose easy over hard every single time. I never saw it, but there was a movie called The Matrix. Came out, 20 years ago. And the idea of, maybe it was more than that now that I think about it. The idea of this was, maybe your dreams are reality and reality are dreams. Now, everybody's hooked up to this machine. You're just lying there. And they feed all these thoughts into your head. So you think you're having a life. And you think that you're living a life. And you're this and you're that. And you're married and you're children. And all of it's make-believe. None of it is true. None of it is true. And there's a line that everybody quotes from there where this one person wants to go back into the machine. He'd been free, wants to go back. He goes, I know this steak doesn't exist, but it tastes just as good as if it did. I remember I was making reference to this when I was in Cape Town, South Africa at an Encounter conference 20 years ago, whenever it was. I was tying it into Mesil Shasharim Paragimel. Huh? But I saw this amazing change take place. People said to me, why does the Kadosh Baruch Hu put us in this world so that we can earn the reward, make us think that we're having a good time anyway? I said, because then you just hooked up to the Matrix. And as time went on, people said to me, so, what do I have to live life for? I would prefer to pretend that I'm having a meaningful life than to actually live one. What do you say to that? What do you say to a person? So the only thing I can say to them is, because at some point the light's going to come on. For everybody, the light comes on. You think, we'll quote our literature again, probably the only Charles Dickens novel that anybody ever learned in school, Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was a this, it was a this, it was a this. But he got paid by the word. Yeah, it goes on and on and on. But anyway, but there's this one character who's sent to the Bastille, and he stays there so long that he loses his mind, and he thinks he's a shoemaker. And he just sits there making imaginary shoes. Dr. Manette. Oof. So when they take him out, he gets his mind back. He realizes that he spent 20 years making imaginary shoes. The end is going to come when the lights will come back on, and you'll find out what the truth is, and you'll realize that you had no life. I had a girl in the Vey. She said to me, I had a friend of mine who was in the Vey Yerushalayim with us, and she, basically took on mitzvahs while she was there, and she went back home and she gave it up. And she goes out partying and doing whatever, and she says, I know what I'm doing is wrong. I know it's meaningless, but I enjoy it. And she brings a marshal. You know what it's like? It's like a person who stays in prison so long that he loses his mind and he starts playing with the rats and he thinks the rats are his friends. And the jailer feels so bad for this guy. He says, I got to do something, And he says, listen, clean out the latrines for a week and I'll let you go. He says, why? I'm happy where I am. And that's what she said. I'm happy with the rats. So I referenced the Tale of Two Cities, and I said, one day the light will come back on, and you'll suddenly realize who you are and where you've been, and what opportunities you let slip out of your hands. So the reason that people don't live meaningful lives is because it's hard. It's easier to do nothing. In the words of Homer Simpson, not that I saw The Simpsons, but, somebody gave me a bunch of copies of old bathroom readers, which are perfect for me because they're filled with worthless information, yeah? So one of them is a juxtaposed quotes from the Greek philosopher and author Homer and Homer Simpson, which I thought was really an interesting kind of a contrast. And he says at one point, I don't know, Marge, trying is the first step to failure. You try, you'll fail. If I never try, never fail. So people are afraid to live a meaningful life. Sheva yipal tzodik. A tzaddik falls 7 times. You pick yourself up, you fall down. You pick yourself up, you fall down. You can't just lie there. At some point, you have to pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and start all over again. But that's what happens during the 3 weeks. We just give up and we say, it's too hard. It's too hard for me. I can't do this. Can't you take care of me? When the Meraglim came back and said, it's too hard for us, let's stay here, God said, okay. What are you upset about? I said, I give you just what you want. God didn't kill them. They stayed in the desert, surrounded by the Ananiya cover, the clouds of glory, eating the mun, drinking from the be'er, living the great life of the Moshe, teaching them Torah. Terrific. When your life is up, you'll die, and that'll be the end. But if you want to go into Eretz Yisrael, and you want to build the Beis HaMikdash, and you want to do something meaningful, then you gotta put it in. You gotta grow up and take responsibility. And it's amazing how few people are willing to take responsibility and do what needs to be done. Ari Goldberg said last week on the podcast, one of my goals is to bring Mashiach. I was at a talk I was giving on behalf of Chazak in America, and Yaniv, who is the founder of Chazak, he got up in front of the crowd and he said, I started Chazak because I thought people aren't bringing Mashiach and I'm going to bring Mashiach. And everybody laughed because it sounded like a funny thing. And he looks at them and goes, I'm not kidding. Why can't you bring Mashiach? You're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're not big enough. I am Dr. Seuss, Horton Hears a Who. And there's this little world that exists on top of this dandelion, and it's going to get thrown into the oil unless everybody else can hear it. And everybody's screaming and no one can hear it until the last little guy gives his voice, and that does it. Maybe you will be that last feeler that will push us over the edge. How do you know? No, people don't give up. People just give up. Why should I try? I can't do it. I can't handle it. In the first Chicken Soup for the Soul book, there's this story. This guy's walking along the beach, and the starfish, they get washed up on the beach. He's picking them up and throwing them back in the water. So someone says, what are you doing? He says, well, if they stay here on the beach, they'll die. He says, but there's thousands of starfish, and this is happening on beaches all over the world. You can't make a difference. He picks up another one, throws it in, and says, made a difference to him. I don't have to save the world. I got to do what I can do. Lo alechem l'cha ligmar. You can't finish it. V'lo atar ben charin liva tel mimenu. But that doesn't mean that you can't try. Just because I can't do everything doesn't mean I can't do anything. The 3 weeks is because we gave up. We built the Egel Zahav because we thought we're too little. We're a little egel. We can't handle it. We listened to the Meraglim because we said we can't capture Eretz Yisrael because we're not up to it, because we're just not good enough. That's not your cheshbon. The Alter of the Vaidik said, I never asked whether or not I could do something. I asked whether something had to be done, and I knew HaKadosh Baruch Hu would give me the koyach to do it. So during this time, and by the way, there is no fate. That's a Greek idea. In Judaism, there's no fate. There is going to come 3 weeks when it's not going to happen. Because we replay events, and there's going to come 3 weeks where the Beis HaMikdash will not be destroyed at the end. Where suddenly everything's going to turn around, and we go, ha-ha, ha-ha, take your best shot, yeah? And instead, the Beis HaMikdash is going to arise. Why not this year? And the answer to that is up to us. If we're willing to grow up and be mature, take responsibility. To be mature, to look at the Yetzer Hara and go, nah, 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 nah. I'm just kidding, that's not mature. But to stand up and say, we have the power to change the world. Everybody argues their limitations. I got an email from somebody who listened to one of my shiurim where I repeat this idea over and over again. And he says, I went down to Orlando for Pesach, and I realized that all these yeshiva bachrim have nothing to do. So I raised money to pay these kids on vacation to come and learn a morning Seder, and I paid them for it. I made special activities for them, and they came every day, yeshiva bachrim, and they sat and they learned. I made a base medrash down there. Because you said that I can make a difference. And that's my credit. Because I did the only thing I know how to do, talk. I don't know how to do anything else. And so, my friends, that's the story. The story is that we're in this time because we weren't mature enough to stop the destruction. We just allowed events to take place. And when we put the brakes on and turn things around, we will be able to make the world the way it should be. We will be that para aduma that chases away death. That's what the para aduma does. It erases death and brings back the world the way it's supposed to be. And that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about this show, you can go to RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can make comments and you can find out about my upcoming schedule. You can contact me. If you want to sponsor an episode, go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast and click on the sponsor an episode button. That's it for this week. I'm David Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.